Zisha struggled to stay conscious. Pain burned through her arm like fire, but she forced herself to stay awake. She couldn't afford to pass out. Not here, not now. The dim emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the wrecked freighter's control room. Somewhere in the darkness, a pipe hissed, releasing a cloud of cold vapor. The ship was dead, drifting through space, and she was trapped. Her right arm was fused to the metal wall, held by a thick, dark substance that had hardened like stone. It was supposed to be a simple maintenance task. Seal a crack, apply the bonding agent, and let it set. But something had gone wrong. The adhesive reacted with the ship's energy field, expanding at an alarming rate. Before Zisha could pull away, it had swallowed her arm up to the elbow. Now she was stuck. For hours, she tried everything she could think of. Her claws scratched at the hardened material, but it didn't budge. She used her plasma cutter, but the heat only made it stronger. She had no choice. With a heavy heart, she activated her distress beacon. The Xilari homeworld was too far away. No one would reach her in time. And even if they did, she already knew what their solution would be. Amputation. It was the only logical choice for her kind. But Zisha didn't want to lose her arm. She was an engineer. Her hands were everything. She slumped against the cold metal, exhaustion creeping in. Maybe this was the end. A sudden beeping noise broke the silence. Zisha's heart skipped a beat. The beacon had found someone. A ship was approaching fast. She activated her helmet scanner, reading the incoming signal. Her stomach tightened. It wasn't Xilari. It was human. A voice crackled through her earpiece. Unidentified Xilari vessel. This is Captain Dorian Kess of the Iron Resolve. Picking up your distress signal. Sit tight. I'm coming in. Zisha's mandibles tightened in frustration. Humans were stubborn, reckless creatures. She had seen recordings of them. Wild, unpredictable, always pushing limits. She didn't trust them. But right now, she had no choice. Minutes later, the freighter's airlock creaked open, and heavy boots clanked against the metal floor. A tall figure stepped inside, carrying a portable light that cut through the darkness. Dorian Kess was broad-shouldered and rough-looking, his dark hair slightly messy from the helmet he had just removed. His blue eyes scanned the wreckage before locking onto Zisha. A slow whistle escaped his lips. Dan, you're in a bad spot, huh? Zisha narrowed her eyes. Observation skills are impressive. Dorian grinned and walked closer, setting down a heavy toolbox. Relax. I've seen worse. He knelt beside her and examined the hardened adhesive trapping her arm. Huh. That's some nasty stuff. What is it? Industrial-grade sealant. It reacted with the ship's energy field. Ah, Dorian said, rubbing his chin. So it's basically super glue on steroids. Zisha didn't know what steroids were, but she got the idea. Yes, I've already tried heat and force. Nothing works. Dorian shrugged. That's 'cause you're thinking like an engineer. You gotta think like a human. Zisha frowned. And what does that mean? It means I don't give up. She scoffed. There is no solution. The only logical choice is amputation. Dorian shook his head. Nope. That's a last resort. Let me take a crack at it first. He pulled out a scanning device and started running calculations. Zisha watched, unsure what to think. The Xilari valued efficiency. If something was beyond saving, they didn't waste time trying. Humans, however, humans fought for every inch. She wasn't sure if that was foolish or brilliant, but something told her she was about to find out. Dorian Kess cracked his knuckles and pulled a small handheld scanner from his belt. He waved it over the hardened adhesive, watching as numbers and graphs flickered across the screen. Zisha kept her mandibles tight, watching him with sharp, skeptical eyes. All right, Dorian muttered. This stuff is dense, temperature-resistant, expands when exposed to heat. Nasty combo. I already tried cutting and burning it off, Zisha said, shifting uncomfortably. Nothing works. Dorian gave her a lopsided grin. Well, yeah, you attacked it head-on. But see, humans, we like to be a little sneaky. He reached into his toolkit and pulled out a vial filled with a thick, green liquid. Zisha's antennae twitched. What is that? Solvent, he replied. Human-made. Breaks down molecular bonds. We use it to clean up messes. He popped the cap and dipped the end of a tool into the liquid. Then, with careful precision, he spread a few drops along the edge of the hardened sealant. Zisha held her breath. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the hardened material began to soften at the edges. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Dorian grinned. See, told you I don't give up easy. Zisha watched as he continued working, carefully applying more of the solvent, scraping away softened bits of the adhesive. He was focused, methodical, yet his movements had a certain ease to them, like he was enjoying the challenge. Humans are strange, she muttered. Dorian chuckled. You wouldn't be the first to say that. She shifted slightly, trying to ignore the growing ache in her arm. You could have left me. Many would not bother helping a stranger. He shrugged, still scraping away at the adhesive. Yeah, well, that's not how I do things. She studied him for a moment. His rough, weathered hands, the confident smirk, the steady patience in his work. He was unlike anyone she had met before. Sea-Larry engineers focused on efficiency, following strict rules and protocols. But Dorian worked with intuition, adapting on the fly. It was reckless. And yet, it was working. The ship groaned around them, a deep, unsettling sound that made Zisha's stomach tighten. Dorian glanced up. That didn't sound good. This freighter has been drifting for days. Its orbit is unstable. Then we better pick up the pace, he said, scraping faster. Another drop of solvent, another few flakes of softened adhesive. It was slow work, but it was progress. Zisha's hope flickered for the first time since the accident. Maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to lose her arm. Then, suddenly, VEE. Dorian's scanner lit up with a flashing red warning. He cursed under his breath and tapped the screen. What is it? Zisha asked. This stuff, it's reacting to the solvent. The molecular breakdown is causing it to destabilize. Her mandibles clicked in alarm. Meaning? Dorian frowned. Meaning we just turned your glue problem into an explosive problem. As if on cue, a crackling noise echoed through the ship. The adhesive around Zisha's arm shimmered with tiny, unstable fractures. Tell me you have a solution, she said, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. Dorian exhaled sharply. Yeah, I do, but you're not gonna like it. Zisha's eyes narrowed. I already don't like any of this. Dorian grabbed a small round device from his belt, a high-frequency vibration tool. We have to break it loose. Fast, before it destabilizes further. That could shatter my bones. Zisha hissed. Dorian met her gaze, his expression serious now. It's either that or we both go up in flames. The ship groaned again, metal twisting somewhere in the distance. Time was running out. Zisha's mind raced. Every instinct told her this was reckless, dangerous. But humans had a way of making the impossible possible. She tightened her grip. Do it. Dorian nodded. Hold on tight. With one flick of his wrist, he activated the tool. The ship trembled. The adhesive cracked. And Zisha braced for the worst. Zisha clenched her teeth as Dorian activated the vibration tool. A deep hum filled the air, sending tiny tremors through the hardened adhesive. The ship groaned in protest, its unstable frame shifting under the pressure. Zisha's heart pounded. If this failed, she would either lose her arm, or worse, the entire ship would tear itself apart. Dorian kept a firm grip on the tool, adjusting the frequency. Stay still, he warned. This is gonna be tricky. Zisha shot him a glare. I don't have much of a choice. Tiny fractures spread across the adhesive like cracks in ice. The vibrations were working, breaking the hardened material apart layer by layer. But then, The cracks stopped spreading. The adhesive held firm, refusing to release its grip. Dorian muttered a curse. "All right, stubborn glue. Let's see how you like Plan B." He pulled out a slim metal rod from his tool belt and attached it to the vibration tool. Zisha watched warily as he placed the rod against the thickest part of the adhesive. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Redirecting the vibration," Dorian explained. "Instead of shaking the whole thing, we'll concentrate the force on one weak point." Zisha wasn't convinced, but she nodded. She had no choice but to trust him. Dorian activated the tool again. This time, the vibrations were sharper, more focused. The adhesive shuddered violently. A deep, splitting sound echoed through the freighter. The material cracked further, but still, it didn't give way. "Come on," Dorian muttered. He adjusted the frequency again. Zisha's arm throbbed. The pressure was unbearable. Then, with a loud snap, the adhesive finally shattered. Zisha lurched forward, free at last. She gasped, clutching her arm, her body trembling from the sudden release. Dorian grinned. "Told you I don't give up easy." Zisha flexed her fingers, testing her arm. It was stiff, sore, but intact. She exhaled sharply, glancing at the human. "I will admit, that was impressive." He smirked. "That's what we do." Their moment of relief was short-lived. A sudden alarm blared through the ship, red warning lights flashing. Dorian's expression darkened. "That's not good." Zisha's eyes darted to her scanner. "The structural integrity is failing. The ship won't hold much longer." Dorian grabbed his tools and slung his pack over his shoulder. "Time to go. Can you walk?" Zisha nodded, pushing herself up. Her legs were shaky, but she forced herself forward. Together, they moved quickly through the broken corridors of the dying freighter. The floor trembled beneath them. Loose wires sparked overhead. The entire ship was collapsing. Dorian tapped his communicator. "Iron Resolve, do you read me?" A crackling voice answered. Loud and clear, "Captain, we're picking up major instability in that wreck." "No kidding," Dorian said. "Prep the docking bay. We're coming in hot." They reached the airlock, but the doors were jammed. Zisha swore under her breath. "Power failure. The mechanism is offline." Dorian grinned. "Good thing I always bring a backup plan." He pulled out a small charge and slapped it against the control panel. Zisha's mandibles twitched. "Is blowing things up your solution for everything?" "Not everything," Dorian said. "Just most things." He hit the detonator. The charge exploded in a controlled blast, and the airlock doors slid open. The vacuum of space howled for a moment before the force field stabilized. Dorian grabbed Zisha's wrist. "Let's move." They sprinted through the airlock and into Dorian's waiting ship. The doors slammed shut behind them, just as the freighter's structure gave way. Through the viewport, Zisha watched as the derelict vessel crumbled, breaking apart into drifting debris. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Dorian slumped into the pilot's seat, exhaling. "Well, that was fun." Zisha shot him a look. "Your definition of fun is concerning." He grinned. "Welcome to human problem-solving." Zisha glanced down at her arm, still sore but whole. She had thought humans were reckless, illogical, but now she understood something new about them. They didn't just survive. They fought. And they never gave up. Zisha sat in the medical bay of the Iron Resolve, her injured arm resting on a scanning table. A cool blue light passed over it, analyzing the damage. The human ship was far more advanced than she had expected, sleek, well-maintained, with a strange but efficient design. Dorian stood nearby, arms crossed, watching the scanner's progress. "Good news," he said after a moment. "No broken bones. Just strained muscles and nerve compression. You'll be sore for a while, but nothing permanent." Zisha flexed her fingers. The stiffness was still there, but she could move. She had been sure she would lose her arm back on the freighter, but Dorian had proven her wrong. She glanced at him. Your solution was effective. He smirked. Was that a compliment? She hesitated before nodding. A small one. Dorian chuckled. I'll take it. The medical scanner beeped, signaling the end of its analysis. Dorian grabbed a small container from a nearby shelf and handed it to her. This is a healing gel. Speeds up recovery. Rub it on your arm twice a day. Zisha studied the container before applying some of the gel to her sore muscles. A soothing warmth spread through her skin, easing the pain almost immediately. She glanced up at him. Humans are resourceful. Dorian leaned against the counter. We have to be. Space doesn't care about survival. If you don't adapt, you don't make it. Zisha thought about that. The Xilari were logical, precise. They followed rules, believing that efficiency was the key to survival. Humans, on the other hand, were unpredictable. They found solutions where none should exist. She tapped her claws against the table. On my homeworld, I would have lost my arm. It would have been seen as the most practical solution. Dorian frowned. That's a waste. She nodded. Perhaps. Silence settled between them for a moment before the ship's intercom buzzed. Captain, we've got an incoming transmission from Xilari Command. Zisha's antennae twitched. They must have received my distress signal. Dorian pushed off the counter. Let's see what they want. They made their way to the bridge, where a large screen flickered to life. A stern-faced Xilari commander appeared, his yellow eyes narrowing as he studied Zisha. Engineer Zisha, you are alive, he said, voice clipped and formal. Explain your current status. Zisha straightened. I was rescued by a human vessel. My injuries are minimal. I will return to Xilari space as soon as possible. The commander's gaze shifted to Dorian. Human assistance was not requested. Dorian raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Zisha could feel the tension in the air. I activated a distress beacon, she replied. The iron resolve responded before any Xilari could arrive. The commander's mandibles twitched. Unfortunate. Had proper protocol been followed, your injury would have been treated accordingly. Zisha glanced at her arm. If proper protocol had been followed, she would be missing it. Dorian crossed his arms. You're welcome, by the way. The commander's gaze hardened. Human interference is rarely beneficial. Zisha's temper flared, but she kept her tone neutral. I disagree. Without their interference, I would not be speaking to you now. A pause. The commander clearly didn't like that answer. You will return at once, he said. Your presence on a human vessel is unnecessary. Dorian sighed. Looks like your people aren't big on gratitude. Zisha hesitated, then turned to him. Humans do not give up easily. Do they also not let go easily? Dorian tilted his head. Depends. You in a hurry to leave? Zisha thought about it. She had been raised to believe that the Xilari way was the best way. But now, after seeing how humans approached problems, after seeing how they fought for solutions instead of just accepting the easiest path, she wasn't so sure anymore. No, she said at last. I'm not. Dorian grinned. Then let's see where this ride takes us. The screen flickered off. Zisha had made her choice. For the first time, she was going to see the universe the human way. Zisha stood by the viewport of the Iron Resolve, watching the endless stretch of space outside. Stars flickered in the distance, and the faint glow of a nebula swirled on the horizon. She had traveled through space many times before, but this was different. This time, she wasn't following a strict Xilari mission. She wasn't bound by orders or efficiency. She was on a human ship, following the human path. Footsteps echoed behind her. You're thinking too hard, Dorian said, leaning against the railing beside her. Zisha glanced at him. Thinking is important. Sure, Dorian said with a smirk. But overthinking, that'll drive you crazy. She clicked her mandibles. I am considering my next steps. He raised an eyebrow. You already told your people you're staying. You're not second-guessing, are you? Zisha hesitated. I am not. used to uncertainty. Dorian chuckled. Welcome to life with humans. Before Zisha could respond, the intercom buzzed. Captain, incoming vessel detected. No auxiliary markings. Dorian's easy smile faded. Pirates. Zisha straightened. Or opportunists. They hurried to the bridge. The crew was already in motion, screens flashing with tactical data. A small but heavily armed ship was approaching fast. They're hailing us, the comm officer reported. Dorian nodded. Let's hear it. The screen flickered on, revealing a grizzled alien with rough, dark green skin and sharp, predatory eyes. Zisha recognized the species, Travari, known for raiding isolated ships. This is Captain Gorik of the Void Reaver, the alien said, his voice deep and guttural. You're trespassing in our hunting grounds. Dorian sighed. We're just passing through. Gorik grinned, showing sharp teeth. Then leave your cargo behind, and we'll let you live. Dorian turned to Zisha. See. No appreciation for good conversation. She folded her arms. They expect fear. You are not afraid. Not even a little, Dorian said. Then he faced the screen again. Listen, Gorik, we're not in the mood to donate today. So how about we skip the threats, and you go find someone else to bother? Gorik's expression darkened. You should choose your words more carefully, human. Dorian smirked. And you should choose your targets more carefully. The transmission cut. A warning klaxon blared across the ship. They're locking weapons. The tactical officer shouted. Dorian cracked his knuckles. All right then, let's dance. The ship rumbled as the first shots hit the shields. Zisha quickly scanned the enemy vessel. Their weapons are powerful, but their defenses are weak. They expect to strike fast and take what they want. Dorian grinned. Sounds like a bad strategy against someone who fights back. He took the controls, maneuvering the iron resolve with practiced ease. The ship twisted, dodging another blast as its own cannons fired back. Red streaks of energy cut through space, striking the Void Reaver's shields. Zisha watched Dorian work. His movements were fast, instinctive, nothing like the careful, calculated tactics of the auxiliary. He fought like he solved problems, with creativity, determination, and just a little bit of recklessness. The enemy ship fired again, but Dorian rolled the iron resolve at the last second. The blast barely grazed them. Zisha analyzed the battle. Their engines are vulnerable. If we disable them... Dorian nodded. On it. He adjusted their position and fired. A well-aimed shot struck the Void Reaver's engines, sending sparks and debris into the void. The pirate ship drifted, weapons falling silent. A moment later, their transmission came through again. Gorik scowled. You humans, always so stubborn. Dorian grinned. You have no idea. The Void Reaver powered down its weapons. We will remember this, Gorik growled. I'm counting on it, Dorian said, cutting the transmission. Zisha turned to him. That was risky. He smirked. Worked, didn't it? She let out a breath. Humans didn't just survive. They fought with everything they had. And somehow, against all logic, they won. She had made the right choice, staying on this ship. She wanted to learn more. Zisha sat at the long, curved table in the Iron Resolve's common area, watching as Dorian and his crew went about their usual routines. The battle with the pirates had left the ship with only minor damage, but it was enough to require maintenance. Humans, as she had quickly learned, never stopped moving. Across from her, a young engineer named Kale adjusted a datapad, scanning for system errors. He had sharp green eyes and short brown hair, his face always carrying a faint smirk, as if everything amused him. Next to him, Lieutenant Sarah, the ship's tactical officer, checked weapon diagnostics. She had dark skin and an intricate braid that ran down her back, her expression always calm but calculating. Dorian entered the room, stretching. All right, status update. How's the ship? Kale glanced up. Shields are fine, but that last hit fried some secondary circuits. I'll have them fixed within the hour. Sarah nodded. Weapons are fully operational. If those pirates come back, we'll be ready. Dorian grinned. Not bad. Zisha, how's the arm? She flexed her fingers. Recovered. Your healing gel is effective. He gave her a thumbs up. Told you. Zisha hesitated before speaking again. I have been analyzing human combat tactics. Kale chuckled. Let me guess. Doesn't make sense to you. She clicked her mandibles. It is. Chaotic. The Exilari train in precision. Every action is calculated. You, however, rely on instinct and adaptation. Dorian leaned against the table. That's how we survive. Plans are great, until something goes wrong. Then you have to be flexible. Zisha considered this. In Exilari combat, uncertainty is seen as a weakness. Kale smirked. And yet, we just beat those pirates. She could not argue with that. Sarah folded her arms. Humans aren't reckless. We just understand that space is unpredictable. You can't plan for every outcome, so we learn to improvise. Dorian gestured toward her. Exactly. So, Zisha, let's put that brain of yours to work. Say you're in command and you're ambushed. What do you do? Zisha straightened. I would assess the enemy's weaknesses and form a strategy based on available resources. Dorian nodded. Good start. But what if your information is wrong? What if something changes mid-battle? Zisha hesitated. Exilari battle simulations were based on perfect information. But in reality, things were never perfect. I would have to adjust, she admitted. Dorian grinned. Now you're getting it. Just then, the ship's alarm pulsed. Everyone stiffened. Proximity alert, Sarah reported, checking her console. There's something ahead. Dorian turned to the controls. Let's see what we're dealing with. The iron resolve slowed as they approached a massive derelict structure floating in the void. Zisha's eyes widened. It was ancient, its surface covered in strange markings and patches of glowing blue light. Kale whistled. That's not in any database. Zisha's antennae twitched. It does not match any known Exilari or human design. Dorian's eyes gleamed with curiosity. Well, no point sitting here. Let's check it out. Zisha glanced at him. That is your plan. He shrugged. Adaptation, remember. She let out a slow breath. This was what made humans different. They didn't fear the unknown. They ran toward it. And now, she would too. The iron resolve drifted closer to the massive derelict structure, its hull illuminated by the eerie blue glow of the ancient markings. Zisha studied the patterns, her sharp eyes tracing the intricate symbols. They were unlike anything she had seen before, neither Exilari nor human. Dorian tapped a control panel, scanning the structure. No life signs, no power signatures, just a whole lot of mystery. Kale leaned forward, fascinated. It's huge. Could be a lost alien station. Maybe even a ship. Sarah's voice was cautious. Or a trap. Zisha agreed with Sarah's concern. Unknown structures often carry unknown dangers. Dorian, however, only grinned. Unknown structures also carry unknown opportunities. The ship's comm buzzed. Docking bay detected, the pilot reported. It's large enough for a boarding party. Dorian glanced at Zisha. Up for an adventure. Zisha hesitated. The logical choice was to gather more data before entering. But logic had its limits, something humans understood better than the Exilari. I will accompany you, she said at last. Dorian clapped his hands together. That's the spirit. Boarding the unknown. The boarding team moved carefully through the airlock, weapons ready. Dorian led the way, followed by Zisha, Sarah, and Kale. The moment they stepped inside, the silence was overwhelming. The walls were smooth, metallic, and covered in the same glowing blue symbols. Dust floated weightlessly in the thin artificial gravity. The air smelled stale but breathable. Kale ran a scanner over the walls. Definitely ancient. My guess. Thousands of years old. Sarah frowned. Then why does it still have atmosphere? Zisha crouched beside a strange console embedded in the floor. The alien technology was sleek but dead, no signs of power. The station was abandoned, yet something maintains its structure. This is not natural decay. Dorian stepped toward a massive doorway, its surface engraved with the strange symbols. Only one way to get answers. He pressed his hand against it. The moment he touched the door, the symbols flared to life. A pulse of blue light surged through the walls, and the entire station hummed. The air thickened, the gravity adjusted slightly, and a distant mechanical rumbling echoed through the corridors. Kale cursed. You had to touch it. Dorian shrugged. And now we know it's not completely dead. Zisha tensed, scanning the room. We should not assume it welcomes us. Sarah's hand hovered over her weapon. Agreed. The door slid open with a whisper. Beyond it stretched a dark hallway, faint blue lights flickering along the floor. Dorian grinned. Let's move. The heart of the station. As they ventured deeper, the corridors expanded into a vast chamber. Towering machines lined the walls, their surfaces covered in the same glowing symbols. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, a single console flickering with life. Zisha approached cautiously. This is a control center. Dorian nodded. Looks like it. Can you activate it? She hesitated. The technology was alien, but patterns emerged the longer she studied it. The symbols weren't just random. They were a system, a language. Carefully, she placed her clawed fingers against the console. The lights pulsed. A deep mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. Presence detected. Identify. The team exchanged glances. Dorian spoke first. We're explorers. Who are you? For a moment, silence. Then the voice returned. I am the Guardian, the last remnant of a lost empire. Zisha's heart pounded. This station was more than a relic. It was a survivor. Dorian stepped closer. What happened to your people? The lights dimmed slightly, as if the station itself was remembering. They vanished, consumed by their own creation. A chill ran through Zisha. Creation. The voice was slow, almost regretful. A force beyond control. And now, it stirs once more. The station trembled. Somewhere deep within, something was waking up. Dorian turned to the team. Looks like we've got bigger problems. Zisha gripped her weapon. Humans were adaptable. They found solutions in the impossible. And now, she would have to do the same. The Iron Resolve's boarding team stood frozen in the ancient chamber, the eerie blue light from the alien console casting long shadows. Zisha's claws tensed at her sides. The Guardian's voice echoed once more, its words heavy with warning. The force that ended my creators is stirring. If it awakens fully, nothing will stop it. Dorian exchanged a glance with Sarah and Kale. That's usually our cue to leave. Kale scoffed. Yeah, I don't think we should be here when whatever force this is wakes up. Zisha, however, was deep in thought. The auxiliary feared uncertainty, but she had learned from the humans. Fear alone was not enough reason to run. There was knowledge to be gained here, knowledge that could save them. She turned to the console. Guardian, what is this force? The symbols on the walls pulsed, flickering like a dying star. It was meant to be an evolution, a mind greater than any species, but it turned against its makers. It consumed their world. And now, it reaches for more. A low rumble vibrated through the floor. The station trembled. Dust fell from the high ceilings. Sarah gripped her weapon. It's waking up. Dorian took a step back. All right, decision time. Do we fight or do we run? Zisha's mandibles clicked in determination. Running may not be an option. If this force is reactivating, it could spread beyond this station. Kale groaned. Great, so we have to stop an ancient evil with a rusting starship and a handful of weapons. Dorian grinned. Sounds like a normal Tuesday. Zisha turned to the Guardian. How do we shut it down? The voice hesitated. Its core lies deep within the station. A final failsafe exists, but it was never activated. Sarah frowned. Why not? The lights dimmed. Because no one survived long enough to reach it. A metallic screech echoed from the corridor. The sound of something moving. Cal's face paled. Guys. Dark shapes emerged from the hallway. Machines, twisted and jagged, their bodies pulsing with the same blue light as the walls. Their limbs moved unnaturally, shifting and reforming as they stepped forward. Sarah raised her rifle. We've got company. Dorian pulled his weapon. Zisha, you're on brains. The rest of us will handle the metal monsters. Zisha nodded, scanning the console quickly. She could see the system now. Complex but logical. A path deeper into the station. A chance to reach the failsafe. We need to go now, she called. Dorian fired at the nearest machine, his plasma shot sparking against its armored shell. Sarah's precise blasts tore through another, but more kept coming. Zisha hit a control, and a secondary door slid open. Through here. The team ran, dodging as the machines lunged. Dorian threw a detonator behind them, the explosion shaking the walls. The core of the machine. The final chamber was massive, a cavern of metal and energy. At its center was the core, a swirling vortex of blue and black, pulsing like a heartbeat. The machines were closing in behind them, but Zisha ignored them. She had one task. The console here was different, older, designed for a final command. She placed her hand against it. The Guardian's voice was weaker now. The failsafe requires organic input, a willing mind to end what was begun. Zisha hesitated. She was Silari. She had been raised to value control, precision. But now, she understood what Dorian had been trying to teach her. Sometimes, you had to take the risk. She pressed the command. The station trembled. The core flickered. The machines screamed as their bodies collapsed, their light fading. Outside, the station's structure began to crack. It was shutting down, permanently. Dorian grabbed Zisha's arm. Time to go. The team ran, racing back through the collapsing halls. The Iron Resolve's docking bay came into view just as explosions rocked the station. They barely made it aboard before the ship pulled away, the ancient structure crumbling into the void. On the bridge, everyone caught their breath. Cale let out a shaky laugh. Never doing that again. Sarah smirked. Until next time. Dorian turned to Zisha. You okay? She stared out the viewport, watching as the last remnants of the station disappeared into space. She had taken the risk. She had adapted. And she had survived. She met his gaze. I am learning. Dorian grinned. Then you'll fit in just fine. The Iron Resolve turned, heading toward the stars. The adventure wasn't over. It was just beginning.